You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at www.xzone-radio.com. You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at www.xzone-radio.com.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Good evening. Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction, and fiction, well, sometimes is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern. That's 7 p.m. Pacific until 11 p.m. Pacific. Right here on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and our fine family of broadcast affiliates across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, 20 Asian countries, and across Europe. If you'd like to give me a call, toll-free, 1-877-528-8255. That's toll-free at 1-877-528-TALK. My email address, xzone@talkstarradio.com. On MSN Messenger, talkstarradio@hotmail.com. And our two websites, www.xzoneradio.com. That's our main website. And if you'd like to watch, listen, and chat with the coolest radio audience in the universe, each and every one of them, www.xzonetv.com. My producer tonight is my good friend, the sweet Miss Melanie at Master Control in Titusville, Florida. Hey, Mel, nice working with you. And, of course, our chat room moderator, Rob from Scarborough. Hey, Rob, nice chatting with you as well before the show. On tonight's show, Frank Warren will be joining me in a few moments. We're going to be talking about UFO Chronicles. Hour number 2, Rosemary Guiley is a paranormal investigator. Hour number 3, Barbara Lamb will be talking to us about reptilian beings. And in hour number 4, David Coing, the Professor Slim King. That's tonight here on the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network. Let's see, today is February the 4th, and on this date in history, 1789, George Washington of Virginia, the commander of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, was elected the first president of the United States by all 69 president electors who cast their votes. John Adams of Massachusetts was elected vice president. In 1861, at a convention in Montgomery, Alabama, 6 states, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina, elected Jefferson Davis president of the Confederacy. In 1861, the 25-year period of conflict known as the Apache War began at Apache Press, Arizona, with the arrest of Apache chief Cochise for raiding a ranch. Cochise escorted his U.S. Army captors and escaped his U.S. Army captors and declared war. 1938, Adolf Hitler took control of the German army and put Nazi officers in key posts as a part of the plan that led to World War II. On this date in 1974, urban guerrillas abducted Patricia Hearst, the 19-year-old 19-year-old daughter of publisher Randolph Hearst, from her apartment in Berkeley, California. 1976, In 1976, an earthquake measuring 7.5 on the Richter scale killed nearly 23,000 people in Guatemala and Honduras. In 1997, a jury in a civil trial in Santa Monica, California, found O.J. Simpson liable for the killings of his former wife and her friend and was ordered to pay a total of $33.5 million to both families. Simpson had been acquitted in his murder trial. In 2004, a Pakistani scientist considered the key figure in his country's nuclear weaponry development admitted that he had leaked that technology to other countries. And the Massachusetts Supreme Court in 2004 refused to allow civil union as a substitute for same-sex marriage. And finally, in the year 2008, U.S. President George Bush introduced a $3.1 trillion budget for the fiscal 2009 year, including proposed increases in military spending, but cutbacks in most domestic programs. And that's this date in history here on the X Zone. I have to take a 2-minute commercial break, and when I return, Frank Warren is going to be joining us as the X Zone starts for today, Wednesday, February the 4th in the year 2009 from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, right here on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Frank Warren is my special guest this hour on the X Zone. Frank Warren has been a student of ufology since the early 1970s. Although Frank's interest encompassed everything UFO, he has had a particular passion for events of a historic nature, having dedicated time to cases such as Maury Island, the Battle of Los Angeles, as well as Roswell, and, of course, Aztec, just to name a few. He is the founder of the UFO Chronicles, as well as editor and frequent writer. Entering its 5th year, TUC is pleased to recognize readers in over 140 countries to grow exponentially. Aside from the many articles, editorials, etc., one can find on the site first-hand reports that are published as they're received via my UFO Experience portal, the website www.theUFOchronicles.com. And Frank Warren, welcome to the X Zone.
Be here, Rob.
Hey, Frank, are UFO reports on the increase? Have they leveled out, or is there a decrease?
Well, I would have to say that they're on the increase, most definitely, at least from what we're seeing in our position. And of course, you know, a lot of that is a lot of that's chaff.
Yeah.
With some wheat in there, but the numbers are up.
Now, Frank, what's your view of the UFO phenomenon? For example, are you a proponent of the extraterrestrial hypothesis?
Well, let me preface that with, I base my answers on my own research, and I've been doing this for decades. And I do believe a small portion of UFO reports are indeed extraterrestrial. And let me add to that extraterrestrial doesn't just mean, in my mind, it's all-encompassing for me, the definition. It doesn't necessarily mean, a little gray guy jumping in a flying saucer from planet Zaton and, coming across hundreds of thousands of light years and landing on our planet. It could, I'm open to the interdimensional notion, or in quite frankly, even time travel. And coming in those distances, space and time, it all has to figure into it anyway. So it's not a narrow focus for me.
Have you ever seen a UFO, Frank?
I've been asked that a lot, and I have, but it wasn't too significant. A few years back, and this was just recently, it was just a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, my wife and I were going to the movies. We were going to catch a matinee, and we were a few blocks away, and I noticed something, a little glint up in the sky, and it was clear blue sky in the summertime, not a cloud out there. And I mentioned that to her, and I says, keep your eye on that while I'm driving. And I would glance up at it. And pretty soon we got to the parking lot of the theater, and I jumped out real quick. And what I saw was a cylindrical-shaped object, aluminum or silver in color, and it was just hovering there. And I was by some trees, so I went to go on the other side of these trees to have a better view of this object.
Right.
When I got to the other side, it was gone. And whatever it was, either left in a hurry or somehow just disappeared. I mean, I scanned the sky. It wasn't, altitude-wise, it didn't seem to be that high, but when I got to the other side, which was a matter of seconds, it was no longer there. I have no explanation for it. And again, it was just, I didn't put too much emphasis on it. It wasn't that significant. Those things don't, distant sightings don't excite me at this point in time. But I have had one.
What, in your view, were the most significant UFO sightings and UFO events of 2008?
Well, I think what would take top billing on that would be Stephenville.
Yeah.
And actually, shortly thereafter, which also pertains to Stephenville, are the radar reports that were pulled in by Glenn Schultz and Robert Powell. That sighting started as a multi-witness visual case, and it was anecdotal evidence, and then the radar information comes in. The radar evidence is pulled in to shore up the witness reports. And there were actually photographs in the sense of, I've seen some cell phone photo images and that kind of thing, that not too well. That very, very interesting case. And another case that happened in April that didn't get that much airtime was Kokomo, Indiana.
Well, what happened there?
Well, that was a very similar sighting in relationship to Stephenville, but it got buried because we had that earthquake in that area just a couple days after that particular sighting.
Coincidence?
Pardon?
Is there a connection, or is it what? Do you believe that the sighting and the earthquake were just?
Well, I think it was a coincidence, an unfortunate coincidence, because I truly believe that we would have, in regards to the mainstream media, the same attention would have been applied as it was with Stephenville. They were very, very similar in nature. You had the military was involved. I actually have on the UFO Chronicles a snippet of some of the 911 calls, and they were speaking of a crash site. There were literally hundreds of emergency personnel involved in this thing. It was rather exciting, and the same type of response from the military when the nearby Air Force bases were contacted. They came up with the same answers as they did with Stephenville. Nothing was out of the ordinary. We were on training missions, etc. And there was a sonic boom that took place that particular instance. And of course, that's against the law if in fact it was done by military. And they were outside the witnesses that saw the jets that were involved, the F-16s. They were outside the MOA of the training area, and again, that of course is illegal. It was a very, very interesting case, and it just did not get enough attention.
I was talking to Peter Davenport earlier this week, and I asked him this question: do you think there was a connection, or is a connection, between the Phoenix Lights and the Stephenville UFO?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. Shortly after the Stephenville incident took place, I interviewed Steve Allen, who, by the way, in my view, is one of the best witnesses that you could get in these types of situations. Number one, he's been a pilot for over 30 years. He's flown he has flown various types of aircraft. He knows, he was raised in that area, he knows the geography, he can judge distances, altitudes, etc. And when he was describing the event to me, the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. And basically what he would describe to me, he was at a neighbor's house. They were out at the burn pile, he and two others. And he catches something out of the corner of his eye, and his attention's drawn to it, and he motions to the other two guys, do you guys see what I'm seeing? And he basically said that he's seeing a pair of lights and then another pair behind it. In his mind, and I may have this backwards in regards to the width and the length of this thing, it was either a mile wide and a half a mile long, or vice versa. In any event, where the lights were spaced out. As he told me that this thing was coming in at a high rate of speed, and as it was nearing them, it was getting slower and slower. He said as it passed them to their left, right as it got to a right angle of them, all of a sudden he can see these other lights, for lack of a better term, that were on the rear of this thing. Now he stopped and he says, Frank, he says, I couldn't see a solid object, but I swear to you a solid object was there. He says these lights were moving in unison. He says there's no way that these could have been individual objects themselves. There was no variation as this thing went along. And I was curious about the rear lights, and I said, let me explain to you what I'm getting from you right now. And I said, just for lack of a better term, I said, let's just call this an invisible flying car. When it was in front of you and coming to your direction, you could basically see the headlights and the side markers. And I says, as this thing passed you and it got to a 90-degree angle and then gradually passed, now all of a sudden you can see the tail lights. And the reason that you couldn't see the tail lights before is because the body of the craft was in the way, even though you couldn't see the body of the craft.
Right.
I said, is that a fair analogy? And he said, bingo. That's exactly it. He says, it's not as if the lights came on. He says, it's if they were always there. He said, then the object, and I'll just call it a craft, he says it went over to Stephenville,
Right.
and then it did some weird things with the lights. It went up into a column, and in fact, that's a complete other story. It did some very bizarre things with the lights. And he said, then it just disappeared. He and his two buddies were just dumbfounded. They just could not believe what they had witnessed. One of the guys was so shook up, he just immediately left and went home. Steve and his buddy go into his buddy's house, and they explain what they had just witnessed to this guy's wife. And of course, the guy's wife, she's looking at these two guys like they grew another head.
I can just imagine.
A couple minutes after that, while they're trying to convince her that they're not kidding, the phone rings, and the third guy that left says, "Get outside, the thing is coming back." They rush outside, and from the direction of Stephenville, hear the objects coming back. Now this time, as it's approaching them, they notice that there's two jets chasing it. And Steve told me, he says, as this thing, again, it's coming back in the direction that it came, which, by the way, as a little sidebar, is in the direction of the Crawford Ranch, the
Right.
presidential ranch. Not a straight shot, but kind of in that direction. It passes over them, and then these two jets are right behind it. He said that as the jets increased their speed, the object would maintain the same distance as if it was playing with them. In fact, that's a quote. He said it was like this thing was just playing with them. But one thing that he mentioned, and this ties back into the Phoenix lights, he says when the thing increased in speed, the white lights that were in the rear turned red. And that rang a bell with me. And I did, after I concluded the interview, I picked up the Phoenix Lights file, and I looked back to some of the early reports. And Richard Motzer of then MUFON, he had taken a report from some eyewitnesses that had witnessed the large V-shaped craft in the Phoenix Lights.
Yes.
And they reported a similar occurrence where when they saw this thing increase in speed, white lights turned to red.
Frank, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Frank Warren is our very special guest this hour. He's the man behind the UFO Chronicles. His website, www.theUFOchronicles.com. It's a great site filled with super information. And Frank and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break and the news as the X Zone continues right here on Talkstar.
You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at
www.xzone-radio.com.
You know that I would be a liar if I was to say
Hi, this is Ken Elliott. When I'm floating around the universe, I always try to tune in to Rob McConnell.
Hi ho there, Twinkie Frog on Sesame Street. When I want to find out what's going on with UFOs or ghosts, I listen to the X Zone with Rob McConnell.
This is Les Corrigan from Target Internet Development. You're listening to Rob McConnell on the X Zone Radio Show.
This is John Hogue, prophecy scholar, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X Zone. Our special guest this hour is Frank Warren. He is the publisher and the man behind the UFO Chronicles.com. And before I get back to Frank, I'd like to say hello to an old friend of mine who dropped in and spent several hours with me here at our studios in Hamilton, Ontario. The original member of the X Zone Nation, my good friend Marty McLean from St. Catharines, who helped me get the X Chronicles newspaper going, was a great supporter of the X Zone radio show. So Marty, it was great seeing you, and I look forward to many more meetings like we had today, my good friend. www.theUFOChronicles.com. Frank Warren is our special guest, and Frank, we were talking about the Stevensville sighting of a UFO going back to the beginning of the year. Do you think, Frank, that the UFOs that are being seen pose a threat to the national security of any country on this planet?
Well, I think they certainly could, and bear with me too, Rob. We've got a bad connection on this end.
Okay,
so I'm
I'm
barely
sorry.
hearing you. I think. Let's go back to what a UFO is.
Mm-hmm.
People have changed the meaning of a UFO, but the very term was born by the Air Force in 1952. It's an unidentified flying object. That unidentified flying object, could be anything. Many people have melded ET and UFO together, and I think they've done so incorrectly. We don't need to get that far into it. A UFO is just that. It's unidentified. It could be friend or foe. Let's face it, the first two people that lost their lives in regards to ufology that we know of was in 1947. And that, of course, doesn't get into Foo Fighters, during the war. I mean, people literally have lost their lives in regards to ufology. So there can be a threat there, although I don't think there's an intentional threat per se.
Disclosure. Stephen Bassett and many other proponents of the disclosure movement say the government knows information about the UFO phenomenon. Damn it, we want it disclosed. What's your opinion on the disclosure?
Well, first off, I agree. I would certainly love to see some form of disclosure happen, although I don't mean to rain on the parade. I don't think we're going to see it in the way that we would like to. I personally believe that disclosure, either total or in part, won't be done by choice. I believe it will be something that the government or other governments will be forced into doing. I think what will take place, I think an event will take place, or a majority, or a number of events rather, will take place that just, the swamp gas explanation won't do. And something that's happened in the last 20 or 30 years, man's personal technology has advanced to the degree that, nowadays everybody walks around with a cell phone camera on
Exactly,
their hip.
yeah.
And when you have an event take place, people are snapping pictures of it. So the powers that be cannot easily, just pass it off as Venus or swamp gas or that kind of thing. And, no matter what goes on, UFOs don't go away. History has shown us that. So I think it will either be the preponderance of events in the totality of it, or a singular event that will be so grandiose that either another government or our government will have to come to the table and explain it.
But having said that, Frank, with all the all the digital cameras that are out there, I haven't seen any photos anywhere that I can look at and say, well, you know what? That really looks like a UFO.
Well, but now you're doing it. What's a UFO? A UFO is an unidentified flying object.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm talking about something that I cannot logically rationalize to be something not of this planet.
Well, I could tell you that there are photographs that are in fact out there, and there have been since the very beginning of what we would deem modern-day ufology. They aren't in abundance, but they do come in, and they continue to come in. And having said that, to me, a photograph at the end of the day is just that. What we see that takes place nowadays, particularly with man's personal technology and the advancement of technology in general, people will photograph things. They're at the beach. In fact, this happened in England not too long ago, and there was a little debate over it. A guy at the beach, he takes a shot. He uploads his pictures to his computer, and he sees this disc-shaped object. Well, in fact, I did a little work on that specific incident, and in my belief, and I think I put enough evidence on the table, it was a bird. It was a seagull, in fact. Yeah. Now, in contrast to that, let's say that somebody has a sighting. They actually see it with their own eyes, and the guy yells to his wife, "Hey, Alice, go grab the camera," and then they take pictures of it. Then you have an eyewitness testimony or declaration along with the image. That the two shore each other up, opposed to just an image by itself. I mean, no matter the quality of the image, if it's just an image, that's all you have at the end of the day.
Do you think that President Obama is going to be a help, hindrance, or wash to ufology?
I think Donald Duck could be the president right now, and it would be better from the dark ages that we just got out of. And that's not a slam on President Obama in any way. I'm glad he's president, and he certainly will be a help. Will we get disclosure out of it in the way that we would like to? I don't think so. Is it possible that something could happen that would precipitate some sort of disclosure? I think so, and I think that's what's going to happen. But what we will get in a positive light is we won't, in regards to freedom of information, these things will be open again. And for researchers such as myself, we'll be able to cull out more information, opposed to this the dark ages that we just went through with the previous administration.
Speaking about the release of information, the British government has released their X-Files, and we've got Nick Pope coming on next week. I've seen what they've released. I've talked to other people, and no one seems to be very excited about anything that the British or the French have released.
Well, I think that's in part because most researchers don't feel that any of the grit or the hardcore information are in any of the releasable files. Personally, I think anything that they do in a public way like that to open up the files and release files is a positive light. In fact, I would actually throw that act into one of the bigger things that happened in 2008 in regards to ufology. These are all good things. And like you, I have looked at some of the files, and there are some interesting cases in there. Like anything, you've got to separate the wheat from the chaff. So I see this as a very positive thing. Brazil's done the same thing not too long ago, as well as we've just heard that the Danish Air Force files have been opened. Yeah. So, all of these other countries, stepping forward, we may get disclosure from another country, perhaps, or so much openness will take place from other countries, it may motivate our government to step up to the plate.
What are your thoughts on Nick Pope's declaration that the Ministry of Defense has issued shoot-down orders for UFOs?
I think that the layperson, I think that'll have a great impact on the layperson to make them aware just how serious the UFO phenomenon is. And it also harkens back to our own shoot-down orders that for example, that Frank Ficino's book with Shoot Them Down, he's done a lot of research on that with the help of Stan Friedman. And we've had the same scenarios here. It just lends credence to just how serious this is if our government has given, the Air Force orders to shoot these things down.
But do we know for a fact those orders have really been issued?
There's arguments on both sides of that. I've seen documentation that I believe is solid that lends credence to the fact that that's happened. There are naysayers to that event, but I think the preponderance of evidence is indicative that it has, in fact, happened. And, and quite frankly, when you have Nick on, he will enlighten you. I listened to an interview with him the other day that was fascinating.
The thing that I can't understand is why would the government give shoot-down orders if there has not been an aircraft that has been shot down by a UFO? That just goes to show the ignorance of this planet.
Well, and there's the question. The question to itself: Why were the orders issued?
You see, this is why I doubt the authenticity and the reality of these orders, because ufology is based on sensationalism. So if we have a lull in one area, let's throw this shoot-down order in to stir the pot again. We get the public interest up again, we get the interviews up again, but no one has come through with any concrete evidence as to the authority given under these orders. The first newspapers to break all these are the British tabloids.
Yeah, well, from their perspective of it, on the British side, opposed to Frank Ficino's work. And, of course, I know Stan Friedman real well, and, again, I have seen documents that I believe are, in fact, authentic.
Wait a minute, you've seen documents from Stan Friedman that weren't blacked out?
Not in this specific instance from Stan, no. I have seen documents through other sources that I believe are authentic, that, in fact, do lend credence to the shoot-down orders. But even if you stay in the realm of stipulation, on either side of that, why would they shoot him down, why they wouldn't shoot him down? Let's not forget what the Air Force is there for. It's on either side. It's the defense of the country. If you have an unknown that comes into any specific area, and you can go back to the Stephenville Lights, when this thing gets into the presidential airspace, we're in a post-9/11 world now. We have two other agencies that have gotten involved in watching and monitoring what goes on into our airspace and anything that's pervious to radar. Obviously, that thing that went through Stephenville was pervious to radar because it was being chased. Now, that said, and again, it's stipulation. Let's presume that you have pilots that that are chasing this thing. Well, what's the next thing that they're going to do? They're going to try to communicate with it. Follow us to the closest Air Force base. You need to land this thing. You're too close to the presidential ranch. What are you doing? Whatever. At that point, if you're not getting any response, then you can, again, stipulation, then the notion would come up where there may be a shoot-down order.
All right, here's a question for you. If you have something that can cross the universe, cross the galaxy, cross the solar system, what makes us think that the puny weapons that we may have compared to the weapons they may have can actually harm them?
There's nothing in the world that could make us think that that could take place.
And don't you think that if we were to open fire on one of these craft, that we would be inviting trouble that we really don't need?
I think that would be a fair assumption, sure. However, one of the things that we collectively, you, I, or anybody, often do is we use human explication to deduce, and assuming there's the ET end of it, and I'm beyond UFO now, but let's assume that some of the UFOs are piloted by ET.
Yeah.
We use human explication to deduce alien intent, and I don't think we can do that. I don't think there's enough data on the table to say that. Who knows why they're here? They might come here to eat our dirt. You have to put a big if when we stipulate on ET intent. If they're like us, if they're societal, if they're biological in the same way that we are. I mean, who knows even if they're biological?
I agree. I agree, but however, if a shoot-down order has been given, the shoot-down order shows that the governments of the world do not have any information on the UFO phenomenon, and that they are not working with the occupants of the UFOs, because if they've ordered a shoot-down, they don't know anything about it, which in my way of thinking says, well, wait a minute, if you don't know anything about the UFO phenomenon and you've ordered shoot-down orders, then you have no information, and the disclosure will not come because it doesn't exist.
Well, if you go that far, you could take it to the next level, and there, some folks have, in regards to the UFOs themselves, and if they're piloted by ET, that it's just not one form of ET, that it could in fact be many races. And again, this is all stipulation, and I hate to even go there.
Sure.
But if you did go there, you could say, well, wait a minute. Perhaps we have, one race of being that we're working with, and perhaps there's bad guys out there.
Stand by. We've got to take our final break for this hour. Frank Warren is our special guest, www.theUFOChronicles.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial set.
Choosing.
Frank Warren's our guest, www.theUFOChronicles.com. It's a great site, Exo Nation. I went to Frank's site today. It's filled with a lot of really good information if you're a ufologist. It's great reading, and that's at www.theUFOChronicles.com. Frank, as a researcher and investigator, what do you deem important in relationship to educating the public about the phenomenon?
I think, that's a good question. Oftentimes, the mistake that I think is made when we talk about ufology in a public place, in an interview such as this, or recently Larry King has spent a lot of time with ufology, people go from A to Z in an instant. They go from a distant light in the sky, to a little gray alien coming from planet Zathon. And when you do that, you lose the audience. You can't do that. First and foremost, the very term UFO was born by the Air Force in 1952. People oftentimes marry the verb believe with the term UFO. There's no question about UFOs. They are a fact of life. If you say, I believe in UFOs or I don't believe in UFOs, it's like saying, I believe in the Empire State Building or I don't believe in the Empire State Building. Neither of those sentences they're both nonsensical. They make no sense at all. A UFO is a fact of life. The argument or the debate is, what is the origin of UFOs? So in terms of educating the public, you have to do it in baby steps, and you have to be repetitious. And you've got to start from the beginning and just take baby steps with it. Let's establish the fact that a large percentage of UFOs, the numbers still hold true today, cannot be explained by conventional means. Then you ask the question, what is this? How do we define that? And even when you get with a so-called skeptic, a skeptic will not argue that point. They'll say, yes, there are UFOs. So then the question remains, what are they? And this is why mainstream science should get involved, for that very reason.
Why won't?
But to go from point A all the way to Z and then talk about
Sure.
Alien cultures and federations, I think is a big mistake.
I've only got time to ask you one more question, Frank. I'd love to have you back on in the future so we can continue this conversation. Why won't science get involved?
It's interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday along these same lines, and one of the good things about Project Blue Book and the government involvement was mainstream science was not too afraid to put to tippy-toe in the water. Now we face the stigma that surrounds ufology. I mean, let's face it, the very first step in science, scientific procedure is the observance of a phenomenon. Science, by its nature, dictates the investigation of the UFO phenomenon. But we're stuck with this stigma that surrounds it, and it's a phenomenon unto itself. And I personally believe this actually has happened by the early debunking efforts by the government. And I don't mean to say that that's some sort of conspiracy.
Frank, I hate to do this, but we've run out of time for tonight. Frank Warren has been our guest, www.theUFOchronicles.com. When we come back from this news break at the top of the hour, Rosemary Guiley will be joining me. She's a paranormal investigator as the X Zone continues live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.